Insightful podcasts by informative hosts. Insights into Things, a podcast network. Welcome to Insights into Technology, a podcast exploring the latest in computers, networking, home automation, mobile computing, and all things technology related. Our hosts will take a deeper dive into the latest and greatest in tech trends and give you the information you need to enable your tech-centric world.
This is Insights into Technology, Episode 10, Loss Logs, and a look at NIST frameworks. I'm your host, Joseph Whalen, and this is your tech news for the week. Our first article comes to us from Bleeping Computer. They tell us that Cloudflare says it lost 55% of logs for customers. Cloudflare recently disclosed an incident where a bug in its log collection service led to the loss of 55% of logs pushed to customers over a 3.5-hour period. These logs, vital for monitoring traffic, troubleshooting, and investigating security incidents, were lost due to a misconfiguration in their log forwarder system, which inadvertently issued a blank configuration. This triggered a cascade of failures in the logging pipeline, overwhelming the buffering system and compounding data loss. In response, Cloudflare has taken steps to prevent similar issues in the future, including implementing a misconfiguration detection system, improving buffer system configurations, and conducting overload simulations. The incident highlights the challenges of managing large-scale logging systems, as Cloudflare processes over 50 trillion logs daily, and underscores the importance of robust fail-safe mechanisms to mitigate data loss risks. It was only for a brief period of time, so I think a lot of people tend to downplay this. The problem that you run into is nowadays all of, or most of, the defense systems for network security are highly dependent on logging for their operations. Log parsing, log analysis does a lot of the work that is needed with the volume of traffic. Cloudflare's logging services are integral to enterprises for monitoring traffic, for congestion purposes, for intrusion purposes. They're vital for security events, investigating security events, and optimizing performance. When you lose 55%, even over, a period of 3+ hours, if something happened during those 3+ hours, which, you could have an advanced persistent threat infiltrate during that time period and now sit dormant on people's networks, and the intrusion would have been undetected and could be later exploited. But we can't lose sight of the scale and the complexity of Cloudflare's logging infrastructure. They've got a very robust infrastructure. They understand the volume of traffic that they do and the importance of the logs. But it's entirely possible that Cloudflare may have gotten to the point of being too big for what they can do or what their capabilities are. 50 trillion log entries a day is a lot of log entries. Of those, only about 4.5 trillion wind up going out to customers. So most of this is internal logging, which makes me wonder what kind of impact this has had on their performance monitoring and optimization, because that's what Cloudflare is. It's optimization, it's load distribution, it's geographic redundancy, and all of that is dependent on performance of the system, and the only way you can get that performance is through log analysis. So I can't imagine, the article doesn't really talk about the impact of Cloudflare's performance during this, but you have to assume that there's some level of optimization or performance that was lost during this time period. The other thing you have to keep in mind is the customers that are using Cloudflare, they're not just e-commerce sites or personal websites or something like that. You've got seriously large enterprises, my company being a customer of them as well, but you have seriously large enterprises who have certain commitments that they have to meet from a reporting and security standpoint, that these logs are flowing into. These logs are filling a lot of these demands. So as a result, you have chances where you may be not fulfilling certain obligations. You may be exposing yourself to DDoS attacks. You may be exposing yourself to failure to meet compliance requirements. The one of the biggest advantages of doing things in the cloud is the robust infrastructure the cloud is supposed to have. You don't have to recreate that over and over again in private environments. And when that convenience starts to become a detriment, customers are going to seriously start looking at what other viable alternatives are out there. Fortunately, Cloudflare's post-incident improvements were, I don't want to say top-notch, but they were certainly up there. Their response includes introducing some misconfiguration detection systems, enhancing their buffer configuration. So what happened was they took the systems down. When they brought them back up, everything started logging and it overwhelmed the system. The concept of doing simulated overload tests, these are all things that should have justifiably been in place already. The fact that they are addressing these now will make it a more robust system, but it's also an example to set for your enterprise customers where these types of things, for a minimal cost, but certainly not cost-free, can be put in place to fortify your own networks or your other cloud providers. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on this story here to see if this type of remediation is rolled out elsewhere on the internet as a more proactive measure. Our next article comes to us from the Hacker News. Spy-loan malware targets millions. McAfee Labs has uncovered over a dozen malicious Android apps on the Google Play Store, collectively downloaded more than 8 million times, that were embedded with spy-loan malware. These apps, targeting users across countries like Mexico, Thailand, and Indonesia, lure victims with promises of quick loans, only to exploit them through social engineering tactics. The apps demand excessive permissions, access sensitive data such as photos and bank details, and use these to extort, harass, and intimidate users for exorbitant loan repayments. While some apps have modified operations to comply with Google Play policies, others continue to pose a global threat by employing shared frameworks for data encryption and exfiltration to command and control servers. This wave of financial cybercrime highlights the rising sophistication of such predatory schemes, emphasizing a dire need for vigilant user practices, such as scrutinizing app permissions and verifying developer authenticity. Experts stress that these apps not only perpetuate financial abuse, but also breach privacy, pushing victims into cycles of debt and vulnerability. As law enforcement and cybersecurity agencies work to curb these operations, users must prioritize their digital hygiene to protect against this widespread exploitation. Now, obviously, this type of situation has an impact on, or at least emphasizes the need for mobile device management, especially when it comes to BYOD, or bring your own device networks, in commercial and enterprise environments where users are bringing their own devices into your network, whether it's cell phones, tablets, laptops, home computers, if they're working remotely. This emphasizes the need to have strict controls over these, and those controls include determining what applications can be installed. MDM management practices on personal devices gets kind of sketchy because there's a privacy issue between the individual and their company. There's security issues in there. Nobody wants to surrender control of their devices to their company without having some level of their own control on it. Ideally, in a perfect world, any devices that you use for company purposes should be supplied to you by the company, should have the company's own management software and security software and practices employed on there, and should only be used over secure connections to the network if you have to work remotely. MDM gets you there, but if you're allowing your employees to bring your own devices, there has to be some type of formal agreement in place that allows the company to exert the control needed to avert these types of breaches. This also highlights the social engineering aspect of malware. We've talked about this on the podcast numerous times in the past, where the biggest risk to any corporate or enterprise network are its users. And unfortunately, you can't get away from that. You can't remove the users from the equation. Otherwise, you no longer serve a purpose. But this particular set of malware employed social engineering to get people to engage in nefarious acts or detrimental acts. And the only way to combat social engineering, and there's no software for it, there's no hardware that's going to stop it. Education is the only thing that you can use to combat social engineering, which is why an emphasis on user training and cyber hygiene has to be in place at every organization out there. You also run into issues here with regulatory compliance. We spoke last week about a couple of cybersecurity frameworks for HIPAA and PCI, but you're also running into situations with GDPR and CCPA where these applications are violating these provisions and this legislation. And it becomes an issue with compliance, and people that are downloading these applications from their Google Play Store, there's a certain expectation that these applications are curated and abide at a very minimum by Google's standards, but also by regional government law as well. And the fact of the matter is a lot of stuff winds up on these online stores that isn't properly vetted or is modified after it's been approved with malicious code. So I think there's a certain and a large chunk of responsibility, not just a certain amount, a large chunk of the responsibility for this malicious spread is really on the App Store itself. They're supposed to be there as a middleman to protect the consumers, which is the biggest advantage of mobile devices where you can only get your software through applications. The Apple App Store does this, Google does this, Amazon. The problem on the Android side is you have so many app stores out there right now that it's almost like the wild, wild west, and they're flooded with apps. They can't keep up with the demand to vet these and to test these. So a lot of things are kind of sifting through the cracks. Hopefully, our app stores will be a little bit more effective in the future at preserving cybersecurity when it comes to our users. The next article we have comes to us from Dark Reading, which is always a fun site to view. This one tells us of a decade-old Cisco vulnerability under active exploit. Cisco is urging users to update their adaptive security appliance software following the active exploitation of a decade-old vulnerability. This flaw, listed as CVE 2014-2120, originally disclosed in 2014, involves insufficient input validation in ASA's web VPN login page, enabling unauthenticated attackers to perform cross-site scripting attacks. Despite being known for years, this vulnerability remains a threat, with a recent in-the-wild exploitation attempt reported in November of 2024. Cisco emphasizes that there are no workarounds, making updates to fix software versions critical for mitigation. This incident highlights the persistent cybersecurity challenge of legacy vulnerabilities that linger unpatched due to the overwhelming volume of security issues organizations face. Experts stress the need for effective prioritization of frameworks to prevent critical vulnerabilities from slipping through the cracks, underscoring the importance of proactive patch management in safeguarding enterprise systems. There's a lot of legacy systems on the internet. A lot of these are computers that are stuck in closets or server rooms somewhere and forgotten, that perform some critical but little known or little understand function for a company that has probably cycled through several IT teams since that thing was put in place. It's a common story that happens more often than it probably should. The exploitation of this particular vulnerability is a good example of that. These are sitting on devices that, for the most part, are stick them in place and they run until they die. If you don't have a robust system in place, and if this is 10 years old, chances are it doesn't have. Obviously, it's going to be out of warranty. It's going to be end of life, which makes it difficult to maintain these now. But if it's 10 years old, chances are the firmware on there does not support modern concepts of auto updating. So any updates that have to happen have to be done manually. And if you don't know that this device exists, you don't know it needs to be updated. There are policies that you can put in place, and a lot of the frameworks, some of the cybersecurity frameworks that we discuss on the podcast here, have patch management and patch prioritization aspects to them. Effective patch management remains a persistent issue for enterprises that are overwhelmed by the sheer volume of vulnerabilities reported each year. This particular vulnerability illustrates how gaps in patch prioritization frameworks can allow critical vulnerabilities to persist. There are some best practices for vulnerability assessment and prioritization that include risk-based approaches or automated tools that focus on high-severity exploits with active threats. Some of these tools come from Tenable, Insight VM, and NextPost from Rapid7, Microsoft Defender Vulnerability Management, SafeBreach, Attack IQ, Darktrace. These are just a few tools out there that will allow you to operate in your environment and allow this prioritization to happen and identify where you have vulnerabilities. This issue itself specifically is related to cross-site scripting issues, which we've touched on briefly. And after several of these mentions, I think we're going to have to do a deep dive on some of the more common exploit types out there, what causes them, and how to mitigate against them. But the vulnerability here allows unauthenticated attackers to leverage cross-site scripting, potentially leading to session hijacking, data theft, or further infiltration into enterprise systems. Now, cross-site scripting itself, a very simple definition, is it's a vulnerability that allows attackers to inject malicious scripts into web applications, which are then executed in the browser of the unsuspecting user. This particular attack leverages the trust users place in a legitimate website and the trust a web application places in user input. Now, you can't ignore the difficulties or the challenges. There's a cat and mouse here between vendor responsibility and enterprise accountability. While Cisco provided updates for the vulnerability in 2014, a lot of organizations didn't implement them. The scenario raises questions about vendor responsibilities and enterprise accountability. Should the vendor force these updates out? A lot of hardware vendors now have implemented auto updates, but we've seen with several organizations, Cloudflare being one of them, where when they push out updates, it's not impossible for them to push out an update on a regular schedule that brings everything to its knees. So there's a risk that you have to worry about there. What role do vendors play in ensuring the products remain safe and secure that they sell over time? You're only going to get a certain amount of updates, certain amount of security updates or OS updates or firmware updates. So there comes a point where you've reached that point of no return. A lot of this is very ambiguous at this time. There's no set rules for it. There's no legislation. And mind you, I'm not suggesting that this is something that the government needs to get involved with to legislate. The last thing we need is more heavy-handed legislation and things. But this is a problem that's been solved. And it's been solved numerous times in multiple organizations. And I think it's really just a matter of the industry getting together and putting together some reasonable protocols around this to solve this problem widespread. So we're going to take our quick break, but before we do, I want to take a moment to invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to the podcast if you don't do so already. You can subscribe to all of our podcasts at Insights into Things. That will get you all of our audio and video podcasts. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, pretty much anywhere you can get a podcast. I would also invite you to contact us, give us your feedback, let us know how we're doing. You can call and leave a voicemail for us at 856-403-8788. That's 856-403-8788. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to get on the show, just mention it in your message. We may alter the message for time and content as appropriate. You can also email us at comments@insightsintothings.com. You can find high-resolution versions of all of our videos on YouTube at youtube.com/insightsintothings. We stream 5 days a week on Twitch at twitch.tv/insightsintothings. You can find those links and much more on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. We'll be right back.
Are you tired of your favorite gaming podcast finishing with a play?
Oh, no!
Well, check out No Credits Rolled, where we play the games but rarely finish them. How's it going, folks? I'm Sam Whalen, your friendly host at No Credits Rolled, the ultimate gaming podcast, where we dish out the latest scoops and reviews on all your beloved video games.
Hey, listen!
Not only that, but we spice things up with some guest interviews and even give you, yes you, a chance to have your say. Tune in every other week for a fresh dose of No Credits Rolled, available on all major podcast platforms, and hit us up on social media at No Credits Rolled. So why wait? Let's dive into the gaming world together, where finishing games is optional, but the fun is guaranteed.
Welcome back to Insights into Technology. Our next article comes to us from Cybersecurity News. They tell us that phishing tool Rockstar 2FA targets Microsoft 365 credentials. Cybersecurity researchers have linked the advanced phishing toolkit Rockstar 2FA to a surge in adversary in the middle phishing attacks targeting Microsoft 365 users. This sophisticated phishing as a service kit, available for as low as $200 for a 2-week subscription, enables attackers to bypass multi-factor authentication and harvest credentials through convincing fake login pages. The campaign has seen a spike in activity since August 2024, leveraging car-themed domains and various email lures like HR notifications and document sharing requests to deceive victims across multiple industries and regions. Rockstar 2FA's features include multi-factor authentication bypassed, dual-factor authentication cookie harvesting, and anti-bot protections, making it highly effective at evading traditional spam filters. Its use of Cloudflare turnstile and obfuscation techniques further complicates detection. Experts warn that such tools not only facilitate credential theft, but also pave the way for secondary attacks like business email compromise. As phishing kits like Rockstar 2FA evolve, organizations must reinforce cybersecurity defenses to counter these increasingly advanced threats. So the adversary in the middle techniques and multi-factor bypass are prevalent in this particular type of exploitation. Many organizations rely heavily on multi-factor as a cornerstone of their identity security strategy, as you should. This exploit highlights the vulnerabilities in traditional multi-factor authentication implementations and raises the stakes for adopting adaptive context-aware security measures. This type of attack highlights the need for layered defenses beyond multi-factor, such as device-based security and behavioral analytics. One of the things that my company started migrating over to ourselves, in addition to multi-factor authentication through authenticator apps or SMS, is the use of YubiKeys, USB keys that need to be, they're physical tokens that need to be plugged into the machine to authenticate against them, which all but eliminates this type of threat. The other thing worth noting here is the phishing as a service concept. The accessibility of these services now is kind of alarming. Rockstar 2FA operates on a subscription model, democratizing access to sophisticated phishing capabilities. In doing so, it lowers the barrier for entry into cybercrime, enabling less technically skilled attackers to launch campaigns with advanced tools. The commoditization of phishing affects the scale and volume of attacks and the responsibility of platform providers in limiting abuse. So in this case here, it's even if the person who's employing these tools may not be technically competent, the tools themselves are almost idiot-proof. And even if it's not a concerted effort or an informed attack, The volume of attacks now are going to go up significantly, and that alone makes troubleshooting them and stopping them more difficult. It overloads the defense systems that we have in place here, so it adds another layer of threat to the overall architecture. There are challenges in detection and mitigation. The use of obfuscation techniques like fully undetectable links, QR codes, and trusted services to deliver phishing emails complicates detections by traditional security tools. Traditional spam filters and endpoint detection mechanisms may struggle to identify these sophisticated attacks. We've talked about this in the past with AI becoming not just a tool of the attackers, but a tool of the defenders. The role of AI in advanced threat detection and identifying these anomalies before they impact operations gets even more critical. It's getting harder, and people refer to this as a cat and mouse game, and that almost makes it sound benign, and it's really not. It's much more a predator-prey type game, and I think that's the best way to depict it here, because everyone out there is a potential victim. These types of things, again, are using social engineering to get people to do things that will compromise their security. In this case here, we're talking about account takeovers, and we're talking about business email compromises. Once credentials are stolen, attackers can launch secondary attacks, including business email compromise. The follow-on attacks result in direct financial losses and operational disruptions, as well as reputational damage. Enterprises can build resilience by monitoring for unusual account activity, but ultimately, this type of thing comes down to the users. The users have to be educated. I can't stress that enough. So we'll see. We'll see how well this goes. There's only so much protection you can get from automated tools, so you can't stop short of training. Our next story comes to us from NBC News. They tell us that U.S. officials urge Americans to use encrypted apps amid unprecedented cyber attack. Amid an unprecedented cyber attack on U.S. telecommunications giants like AT&T and Verizon, officials from the FBI and CISA are urging Americans to use encrypted messaging apps to protect their communications from foreign hackers. Dubbed Salt Typhoon, this hacking campaign, which we talked about last week, by the way, attributed to China, is one of the largest intelligence compromises in U.S. history, targeting call records, live calls, and sensitive systems used for lawful surveillance. While officials emphasize the importance of end-to-end encryption for securing personal data, they warn that fully evicting the attackers from compromised networks remains a long-term challenge. This cyber espionage campaign highlights the vulnerabilities of unencrypted systems and underscores the need for individuals and organizations to adopt robust cybersecurity practices, including regular software updates and phishing-resistant authentication. Privacy advocates have long championed the use of encrypted tools like Signal and WhatsApp, and this incident further reinforces their importance in safeguarding sensitive information against sophisticated espionage efforts. So this one's an interesting one. For the longest time, government officials, law enforcement, federal law enforcement have been trying to get the effectiveness of encryption reduced. Because one of the things that encryption does is it makes their jobs harder. You've seen situations with mass shooters and their iPhones being locked, and the federal government jumps through some pretty sophisticated hoops to get these devices unlocked so they can get the information. They've gone so far as to contract with private companies. I know one happens to be based in Israel to crack the phones open. Apple has repeatedly said that they don't hold the key so they can't unlock them. And recently, news came out that Apple has imposed auto reboots on machines that are locked, on devices that are locked, after a certain number of days, which makes these cracking tools less effective. So now, because you have these adversarial people, I have to say people because I don't know if it's an organization or if it's a government entity, but they're in our telecommunications networks. And our telecommunication networks, many people don't realize this, our telecommunication networks in this country, are built to allow law enforcement to do their jobs. They can exfiltrate information. They can put traces in. They can do message retrieval, record retrieval. So in order to comply with federal and state and local warrants, our telecommunications companies have that functionality built in. And that is exactly the functionality that Salt Typhoon is taking advantage of. This is all part of the Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act. And the problem is when you build these backdoors into the systems, you're building vulnerabilities in. Even though the intent is for legitimate legal use only, the fact that you've compromised the security of the system makes it vulnerable to attack. And as soon as an adversarial group discovers these holes, they're going to exploit them. And we have it, despite great effort on the part of law enforcement to put backdoors into encryption. The federal government hasn't mandated that yet, thankfully. Hence why these other private applications that do end-to-end encryption are being suggested for secure communications. But, this is just another example of the evolving threat landscape and the role that nation-state espionage is playing into cybersecurity now. This is just another reason why we should be strengthening our mobile and telecommunication security, following really common sense cybersecurity practices that are outlined in numerous frameworks, and protecting ourselves against these types of attacks without trying to weaken security. And this is when the federal government is telling you to use Signal and WhatsApp, it's a pretty bad breach. The last article we have for this week, thankfully, is not cybersecurity. We seem to only talk about cybersecurity on this podcast lately. TechCrunch tells us that Intel's CEO has retired. I think retiring is a very generous term to attach to this, given his tenure. Intel CEO Pat Gelsinger has retired effective December 1st, capping off a turbulent tenure that saw ambitious but faltering attempts to revitalize the company. During his leadership, Gelsinger spearheaded initiatives to reposition Intel as a leader in chip manufacturing, advocating for massive investments in U.S.-based facilities and securing up to $7.86 billion through the CHIPS Act. However, Intel faced significant setbacks, including delays in its advanced 18A manufacturing process, missed opportunities with key clients such as Apple and Sony, and faltering AI chip competition against NVIDIA. The company's revenue plunged by a third during his tenure, culminating in its largest ever quarterly loss of $16.6 billion in October and a projected $3.68 billion annual loss, the first loss they've had since 1986. Interim co-CEOs David Zinsser and Michelle Johnston-Holtis will lead Intel as it navigates significant challenges, including restructuring efforts, a leaner operational strategy, and revitalizing its manufacturing and its manufacturing and foundry capabilities. With Intel spinning off its foundry businesses and reportedly exploring divestitures like Mobileye, the future remains uncertain. As Intel aims to regain its competitive edge, the leadership transition marks a critical juncture for the iconic chipmaker to rebuild confidence among investors, partners, and consumers. So I don't think this comes as any real surprise to anyone, given how spectacularly Intel seems to have crashed and burned under his leadership. But it does highlight a couple of interesting things, including the shift to the strategic shift to foundry independence. Their decision to spin off their foundry business into an independent subsidiary reflects a critical response to investor demands and competitive pressures from Taiwan TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor, I guess. I can never remember acronyms, and I work for a company that deals with the government, so there's tons of acronyms I have to deal with. But Samsung as well. The move does aim to position Intel as a key player in the global semiconductor supply chain, but raises questions about its execution capabilities. The leadership instability will also have an issue or have a impact on enterprise solutions, with a dual interim leadership of Zinsser and Holtis. It comes at a critical juncture for Intel's enterprise offerings between AI, data center chips, and edge computing solutions. They're kind of at a critical juncture right now. They've obviously missed the boat on AI. They're playing catch up there, and this is after a decade or more of several black eyes with chip issues and manufacturing challenges and failed initiatives. AI is where the money is right now. You look at what NVIDIA is doing and the money that they're raking in for their AI efforts, and it's pretty clear that that's where the profit center is right now, and Intel's not even close to it. So they're going to do a restructuring. They're going to do some cost cutting. They have a $10 billion cost reduction plan that they're going to work through. This will involve job cuts, project delays, and it raises questions about the ability to innovate while trimming these operations. What does this mean for enterprise clients relying on Intel's roadmap? You've already seen Apple abandon them, Sony abandon them with their PlayStation initiative. So they've got a lot of damage that they have to fix. Intel's role as a recipient of a CHIPS Act funding underscores the intersection of corporate strategy and national policy in securing U.S. semiconductor leadership. How will Intel's struggles affect its standing as a flagship beneficiary to federal investment? Intel's leadership woes might undermine its ability to fulfill expectations tied to public funding. What could this mean for future government industry collaborations in the tech sector? It's getting more and more difficult to land government jobs with more regulation and requirements for obligations in place, and this may be quite the black eye that Intel might not come back from. So I definitely think it's a good thing that he's out. I think it's probably too late to really make enough of a difference. I think his guidance of the company has been exceedingly costly, not just in profit and revenue, but reputationally. Intel's getting beat up pretty bad. I mean, between Intel and Boeing, I don't know which company's done a worse, which company management's done a worse job, but it's certainly a tight competition between the two of them. So we'll see. It's hard to think of a computing world that doesn't involve Intel as a primary partner, but that may be the reality moving forward. Of course, the shift towards ARM-based processors that are optimized for AI doesn't really help Intel. Intel's technology innovations have been lacking. Their storage innovations have taken a beating. Their processors have taken a beating. They've held on to the x86 architecture for way too long. You know, even Apple built in-house processors at this point are far surpassing the performance of even the most moderately priced Intel processors now. So we'll see. This is going to be a make or break point for Intel moving forward. We're going to take our second break, and when we come back, we're going to pick up our talk on cybersecurity frameworks, and we're going to take a look at some of the NIST frameworks. We'll be back in about a minute.
Insights into Entertainment, a podcast series taking a deeper look into entertainment and media. Our husband and wife team of pop culture fanatics are exploring all things from music and movies to television and fandom. We'll look at the interesting and obscure entertainment news of the week. We'll talk about theme park and pop culture news. We'll give you the latest and greatest on pop culture conventions. We'll give you a deep dive into Disney, Star Wars, and much more. Check out our video episodes at youtube.com/insightsintothings. Our audio episodes at podcast.insightsintoentertainment.com, or check us out on the web at insightsintothings.com.
Welcome back to Insights into Technology. In this part 3 of our look at cybersecurity frameworks, we're going to take a look at a few popular frameworks published by NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, NIST is a U.S. federal agency within the Department of Commerce. They play a critical role in advancing measurement, science, standards, and technology to enhance innovation and economic security in the United States. NIST is renowned for its cybersecurity framework and other publications. Today, we'll be looking at two well-known frameworks from the NIST 800 series. NIST 853 defines security and privacy controls for federal information systems and organizations, and NIST 800-171 provides guidelines for protecting controlled unclassified information, or CUI, in non-federal systems. So the first one we're going to take a look at is NIST 853. This is referred to as the backbone of federal cybersecurity. It's a comprehensive framework created to serve as the backbone of cybersecurity for all federal agencies. The framework provides detailed guidelines and controls designed to protect federal information systems from security threats. It establishes a structured approach to managing risks, ensuring that sensitive data and systems are safeguarded across various federal environments. Although it was developed for government agencies, the principles and controls within NIST 853 are widely applicable and have been adopted by other sectors looking to strengthen their cybersecurity postures. Excuse me. At the heart of NIST 853 is a risk management approach. Risk management is about identifying potential threats, understanding how they might affect an organization, and implementing measures to prevent or minimize damage. NIST 853 outlines specific steps to assess, respond to, and monitor risks continuously. By following these steps, organizations can proactively address vulnerabilities, reducing the likelihood of security incidents that could compromise critical information. NIST 853 organizes its controls into different categories or families, which addresses distinct aspects of cybersecurity. These control families cover a broad range of areas, from access control, which ensures that only authorized individuals can access certain information, to incident response, which provides procedures for managing security breaches when they occur. Other control families include system and communications protection, identification and authentication, and personnel security. This structured breakdown, this structured breakdown makes it easier for organizations to focus on each area of cybersecurity and apply the necessary controls to protect their systems. In practice, NIST 853 has proven useful not only in federal settings, but also in non-federal environments such as healthcare, finance, and education. Private organizations often look to NIST 853 as a benchmark for cybersecurity best practices. For instance, a healthcare organization that handles sensitive patient data may adopt NIST 853 controls to protect personal health information, even though it's not required by law to do so. The flexibility of NIST 853 allows it to be adapted to various environments, providing organizations with a solid foundation for building their security programs. The framework is periodically updated to reflect the changing cybersecurity landscape. As new threats emerge and technology evolves, NIST updates its guidelines to ensure they remain effective and relevant. Recent updates have produced new controls and revised existing ones to address contemporary security challenges, such as those posed by cloud computing and remote work. These revisions help ensure that NIST 853 remains a valuable resource for organizations seeking to maintain robust security practices in an ever-evolving digital world. Now, I haven't worked a lot with 853. I haven't had to. It's not a requirement for what my company does. I was privy to, I want to say, an inadvertent audit. One of our customers came in and wanted to do, I forget what family it was. I think it was reporting or incident response, something like that. One of the families, they wanted to come in and they wanted to do an audit for our procedures. And it turned out that for the most part, we were compliant, but there were a couple of things that we weren't compliant on. And midway through this audit, about 4 hours into the audit, the auditor goes through his documentation and realizes that he's trying to audit us for NIST 853, where as a non-federal agency, as a private corporation, we were obligated to adhere to 800-171. So the controls that we weren't compliant with from 853 didn't exist in 171. So there was a bit of confusion on the part of this particular prime contractor there, which left me a little disconcerted, but it did prompt me to go do a little bit more research on 53, which compared to 800-171 is draconian, absolutely, positively draconian. But that's a good segue into our discussion on NIST 800-171. So NIST 800-171, the purpose of this is protecting controlled unclassified information. It's a set of guidelines developed to protect CUI, specifically within non-federal systems, particularly, I must get paid to say particularly here, particularly in the defense of in the defense contracting sector. Controlled unclassified information refers to sensitive information that, while not classified, requires safeguarding to prevent unauthorized access. This information could include personal, financial, or operational details. If exposed, could impact national security or organizational operations. NIST 800-171 provides a structured approach for securing such information, helping contractors and organizations involved in federal projects to manage the risks associated with handling sensitive data. One of the essential aspects of understanding NIST 800-171 is knowing how it differs from NIST 853. While both frameworks aim to protect information, NIST 853 was designed primarily for federal information systems, offering a broad set of controls across diverse environments. NIST 800-171, on the other hand, is tailored specifically for non-federal entities that handle CUI on behalf of the government. This focus on CUI means that NIST 800-171 has fewer controls than NIST 853, making it more accessible for contractors who need to implement security measures without the extensive resources available to government agencies. For contractors, following NIST 800-171 is not just a recommendation, it's often a contractual requirement when handling federal information. This framework mandates specific practices such as encryption, access control, and regular monitoring of information systems to protect CUI. Compliance with NIST 800-171 is crucial for contractors who wish to maintain their federal contracts, as non-compliance can lead to penalties or even a loss of contract eligibility. By adhering to these guidelines, contractors not only safeguard their partnerships with the government, but also demonstrate a commitment to data security, which can enhance their reputation and trustworthiness in the industry. Currently, organizations are preparing for the transition to NIST SP, or Special Publication 800-171 Revision 3. This upcoming revision reflects updates to address emerging security threats and challenges, ensuring that the framework remains relevant in an evolving digital landscape. Revision 3 is expected to introduce new controls and refine existing ones, helping organizations enhance their protective measures for CUI. Preparing for the shift involves understanding the changes in the requirements, updating internal policies, and adjusting technological measures to meet the new standards. For contractors staying informed about these updates and proactively adapting them, it's essential for maintaining compliance and securing government contracts in the future. Insights from contractors who have successfully achieved compliance, highlight the practical challenges and solutions involved in implementing NIST 800-171. These experiences provide valuable lessons for other organizations, especially small and medium-sized businesses, on how to approach compliance cost-effectively. For many contractors, the journey to compliance involves balancing security requirements with operational needs and investing in technology and fostering a culture of cybersecurity awareness for their teams. So NIST 800-171 is important specifically in the role that I play professionally. I work for a subcontractor who typically gets our contracts through primes. As far as I know, I don't think we contract directly with any federal agencies. But as part of that, we receive COI data, whether that's drawings, specifications, bills of material, even contract information can be considered COI. Anything that you can possibly discern useful information from that could compromise or otherwise put at risk the projects that you're dealing with is generally the accepted definition of what COI is as far as what we're doing. My company specifically has to be compliant with CMMC, Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification 2.0, which goes officially into effect December 16th, I believe. That, and we'll talk about that framework in our next podcast. But there are multiple levels to that, and the level 2 compliance, which is what my company must maintain, is basically a mirror reflection of the 800-171 requirements. So as a result, I tend to be more versed on this. And I'll tell you, there's 110 controls involved. Those controls, as outlined in the official specifications, are, as you might imagine, vague. It's a framework. It's not specific. So it'll say something, and then you have to interpret what it's saying as to how it pertains to your environment and then implement those controls appropriately. So it kind of leaves some ambiguity there, but that ambiguity is meant to be a level of flexibility. So these are the two big U.S. government cybersecurity frameworks that are out there. That one is for federal agencies, one is for private or commercial industries that work with the federal government. So that's the general overview of these. We're not going to get into a lot of the details on these. We may do that at a later date. But that was all we had for this week. Before we do go, I want to once again invite our listening and viewing audience to subscribe to Insights into Things. That will get you all of our podcasts, both video and audio versions. You can find us on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn, pretty much anywhere you get a podcast these days. I would also invite you to contact us, give us your thoughts. You can give us a call and leave a voicemail at 856-403-8788. That's 856-403-8788. You can email us at comments@insightsintothings. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/insightsintothingspodcast. We are on Instagram at instagram.com/insightsintothings, or you can find links to all that and more on our official website at www.insightsintothings.com. And that's it. Another one in the books.